Hello and welcome to the Velocino Cycling Podcast, where the best stories have not yet been written. For some reason, not everybody is aware that the highway code has been updated for the UK, and we've got some new rules, some new guidelines, some new regulations, some new stuff that we've been asked to do, both as cyclists and car drivers, and also if you're on a horse or if you're ever walking down the street, this affects you. But it doesn't seem to be getting promoted very well. So we thought we should find an expert to take us through it and almost work out, okay, as cyclists, how does this all affect us? But also as car drivers, what's the best thing for us to do? So we needed an expert, and we didn't have to look too far. In the extended Velocino family, we found Dean Powell, our expert driving instructor from the Chiltern Learners, who's agreed to join us today to take us through some of the changes of the highway code and really how we should be adapting to it, whether we're driving or whether we're on bike. So, Dean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here. Yeah, and it's just around the corner.
Exactly.
Well. A local man indeed.
You've not even had to get in your car to get it. They've been that close. Just for everybody on the podcast, by the way, I did drive here, and I was just about to park, and I saw Dean walking up the street, and I thought, you know what? I'll wait for him to go past before I do my reverse parking. Because I'm not very good at it, and yes, wanted to pretend that,
No pictures were taken by you.
No, I got away with that one. I got away with that one. Brilliant. Well, look, Dean, before we get into details of the highway code, even though I've known you for a few years, how long have you been a driving instructor?
Well, I've lived in Wendover for 22 years and worked professionally as a driving instructor for nearly 19.
19 years.
19 years. The great and the good of the Chilterns. I've taught many people.
Brilliant. Well, look, now the Chilterns is filled with some famous. So it's one of those questions you ask a black cab driver. Have you had anyone famous not in the back of your cab, but in the seat next to you, advising them?
No, nobody's super famous. A few kind of minor rock stars I've had, but
wow.
None that you would know of.
Oh, what?
We are the local. We are the only local rock stars, right?
That's what I thought we were.
Yeah, I'm a bit shocked now.
But yeah, no, nobody any super famous.
Not yet. Well, look, anybody on the podcast wanting to drive and is super famous, please, Chiltern Learners, give them a call.
Great, yeah.
Absolutely. So 19 years, you must have seen sort of various different iterations of the code, or just, the code getting updated. But because for me, although I've sort of heard about these changes, does the code get updated a lot?
It gets updated quite regularly, but probably not in the way we've seen it recently. This is, to me, quite a sea change that they're doing. Or that they've done. It's happened. It's live and direct now. So yeah, there will be small changes and things that happen, things that fit with new regulations, all the mobile phone things going on, things with handheld devices, and all that sort of thing tends to get sort of updated without you really hearing about it, I suppose, as being a big thing. But this has come on to us. It happened 30th of January, I think it was. This was the start that we heard all these changes were happening. And yeah, I think, as you were saying, a lot of people won't be aware of this.
No, absolutely. And whenever I've seen some of the advertising of it, or where it has been promoted, what I had noticed is that everyone seems to be picking out their one rule that they want to really get behind. Obviously, it's almost being left to people. No offence to the Daily Mail, but the Daily Mail picking out one particular thing and saying, isn't this terrible because they've allowed cyclists to now do this? Or, Horse and Hound are saying, isn't this great because it's now allowed this around horses? But there's not much where there's kind of somewhere that's giving it all. So where do you get when you're thinking, right, so what are the changes? Where do you go to get the kind of the gospel, the truth?
Our directive will come from the DVSA, the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency. They're the government agency that set the rules and deliver all that sort of stuff to the driving instructor industry. So yeah, it comes down from them.
Okay, brilliant. Well, look, so let's get into the rules. Get into some of these changes because because I guess there's kind of a lot of things there, and you described it as a sea change, and there's various different levels of changes. So, what for
Yeah.
you are you seeing as kind of the big changes and shifts?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I'll come on to what I consider the big sea change in a second, Mike. But I think the main change or the main guidance they're giving now is that there's going to be a hierarchy to road users. And at the top of this hierarchy are the pedestrians, those considered most vulnerable in an accident, and we'll probably all understand that, and a good thing to get out there. So number one in that hierarchy, pedestrians. Number two, cyclists. Number three, horse riders. And then number four, motorbikes. Five, cars and taxis. And then we go on to minibuses, van man, and then up to large trucks and passenger carrying vehicles. So that's the hierarchy that's been introduced.
Now, when I saw that, I honestly, the way for me to remember this, I took away was I just thought of Spider-Man. I thought of the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. So in my mind is the new hierarchy. If you're getting confused and you're not quite sure where it fits, just think, have you got more power than the other person, kind of thing? And that's probably a better way of kind of like doing it. But yeah, so that hierarchy, I guess it's one of those things that some of us would probably treat as common sense, but it's great that it's now in the code and guidelines.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, it's common sense, isn't it? But now it's out there, and there's a new hierarchy, and then let's sort of get on to number one. Then let's talk about the pedestrian, and I think this is the big sea change that they've made, in as much as now the pedestrian, when they're coming to a junction, will have priority to cross that junction. The road user, the car driver, the cyclist, the motorbike, will now be expected to stop at that junction and let the pedestrian cross the road. And that's, to me, a big change.
That is a big change. So just to be clear, so that's when you're coming up to a junction, if you're the car and you're turning into a junction and there's a pedestrian walking, whoever's going straight on gets the right of way, continues to go, you wait for the pedestrian to cross the road, and then you turn into your thing.
Yes.
Now, this looks like, now, as you said, that's quite a big sea change, but also it's one of those things where you really need both sets of people to know that this is the new rule.
Yeah, you don't want to be the example, right? You want to be the very first one. Like, hey.
But also, Mike, bit of clarification. You said that the person's crossing the road. They don't even have to be crossing the road. They have to be at the side of the road wanting to cross the road. We now, as drivers, have to stop and let them cross the road. Okay. So this is a big change.
And this is super interesting, actually, from a German point of view, where I did my driver's license, because we look at it from a different point of view. Like, so when I came to the UK, a lot of these things, like how the highway code was before, was really confusing to me, because in Germany you would always look at like a straight line. So as an example, there's a pavement and there's a road and there's like two straight lines.
Yeah.
And then at that moment, when the car wants to turn left, for instance, turning in,
Yes.
you cross the line of the pedestrian.
Right.
So obviously, from a German point of view, you would have to stop to let the pedestrian continue on his or her line.
Yep.
And when I came to the UK, I was really shocked, because nobody ever stopped like at my line. I was like, why would they not stop?
But
don't we love German logic?
it makes a lot of sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
It does make a lot of sense.
I like that.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Even with cycling, like when you cycle on the left-hand side of the road, right? You cycle and the car overtakes you and turns left. At this moment, the car is crossing your line.
Yeah. And just going on to that point, as you mentioned, Mike, I mean, both parties have to be aware of this situation, and this is where confusion is just going to run riot, I think, because, you have that scenario, the man turning left into the side road, sees the pedestrian, stops. The pedestrian looks at the driver, what's he going to do? Are you going to go? Shall I go? Shall I? Well, And then you've got another guy that wants to turn right into the road. He's stopped also. So now you've got a massive, great traffic jam up and down the road. The cycle, he's looking.
And all you then need is just either a horse rider to come around the corner.
And then the pedestrian is like, "Oh, I was just waiting for for the."
One shouting to the other, "Who's got more power? Hang on, have I got the responsibility? We're right." But so it's a really good point that confusion and the fact that this highway code isn't being particularly well sort of publicised at the moment also indicates it's probably going to be slightly more confusion if you're not looking for it. So that's the big one is the pedestrian.
That's the big one for me.
Because
I think the other thing is, and I'm sure we were talking about your girls earlier, Mike. How did you teach them to cross the road?
Stop and look both
wait
ways.
for it to be quiet, and when it's clear, you cross the road. Now we have to change that. We have to change that psyche of a lifetime. This is madness to me.
Yeah,
That's tough. And then also it's not being publicized really, right?
Really.
So
No.
see, the other interesting thing is if you're a pedestrian coming the other way, for example, the way we've described this so far is we're in the UK, so we're driving on the correct side of the road.
left.
Yes. So and we're thinking, obviously, you're turning left into a corner, for example, to turning, and the pedestrian is walking on your left and coming up to this point.
Yes.
Now, if a pedestrian is coming the other way, what about the car that is now on the left that's coming up to the junction? Because do they have to wait for the
Yeah.
pedestrian
The
as well?
pedestrian
Okay.
has priority. Yeah.
In every case?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
In every
Okay.
case. Yeah.
That's good to know. It certainly explains why I felt that bump under my tyres. It's like, no, I mean, so
No, I think it comes all down to this, publicizing it, like making it people aware, and how the media is responding to it. I think is quite shocking because there is a lot of sense to it. If you just say, look, you just want to keep your granny or your grandpa safe when they
Sure.
go, like down to the shops,
Yes.
right?
Yes. But to me, Niels, and I know you were talking about what was perhaps the norm on the continent.
Yeah.
We, as a nation, don't understand this. We're now asking us to make this big change, and this is where I think a lot of confusion is going to happen. Another really interesting point that I came upon the other day. I follow a guy, and this might be some people might want to look at this guy. He's called the Black Belt Barrister. Don't know if I follow him on YouTube, and he takes in all sorts of legal stuff about speeding fines and all this sort of thing. And he's been right on top of this all happening. And he said they haven't considered what guide dogs have to do. Guide dogs are trained
True.
when they come to a road with their user. They sit and they stop and they wait for that road to be clear before they will cross. They will not cross if there's a car that stops there. They're not going to move until that car and that road is clear. How is that going to work?
see,
They haven't considered that at all.
there are so many different knock-on effects to this change that don't seem to have quite been adopted.
Thought
But
through.
the interesting as well is we're all some people listening to this maybe thinking, well, that's a bit strange, that's a bit odd. And we're seeing in the press people saying, well, I think that's a crazy rule. The fact is, it doesn't matter what you think about it.
It's
there
the
now.
rule.
It's the rule. It is the rule now. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter whether we agree with it or not. We've all got to adhere to it. So we've got that with the pedestrian. What other rules
So
are there that's come
then let's move on to the cyclist. And as we're all cyclists, I'm not much of a road cyclist, and I think these rules are more aimed at the road cyclist. We're now given guidance, and this is the terminology they're using, guidance that when we're riding on quiet roads, we should cycle in the middle of our lane, where perhaps we're all a bit more used to cycling a little bit nearer to the side of the road. We're now given the guidance to cycle in the middle of our lane. But within that, I think, to also give and be aware of other road users around you, and if you hear vehicles coming, to move over and allow them to pass.
Yeah, and I think that one, when you see most people cycling, I guess, look, let's face it, none of us want to, particularly we're recording this in February, so nobody really wants to be near the gutter at the moment anyway. It's absolutely filthy.
Yeah.
So you do want to keep a little bit slightly further away from it. A quiet road makes sense, particularly if side of the road, normally where the surfaces going and all that kind of stuff. Makes sense. But also that responsibility that, you know, if you do hear a car behind you, don't stay in that middle of that lane. Let them come past where it's safe.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty good rule.
Yeah.
You're then sitting in a much more visible position if something's coming towards you, and then, as you say, as long as you're aware of them, we can pull over and allow them to pass.
Yeah, I have a good anecdote from when I was younger. So basically, back in Germany, I was a canoer at a lake, and it was a private property, the area. And some of us were allowed to drive down to where the holes were where we were storing our boats. And at the entrance to this lake, there was a big sign saying like, it's a private property, normal road laws do not apply, but mutual respect applies at all time. And I think this is something so valid, like mutual respect. You know, when you are out on your ride, and you know you're blocking someone for quite some time, maybe just look for a place where you can move over. At the same time, when you are like a car driver and you see a cyclist, don't scare the shit out of this person, right? Like give this person time to allow you the time to pass.
I think that's a really good point, Niels, because I think, you know, we're all pedestrians at some stage, we're all cyclists at some stage, and we're all drivers at some stage. It just depends which moment you're in, whatever you're doing, and how you respond to that situation, isn't it? And I think, there is a big divide, I think, with the car user. Let's not just say the car user, but the driver and the cyclist. There is, I think, in this country, a bit of an us and them situation, isn't there?
Well, I mean, I also, you know, personally, I believe that the right of way is whichever form of transport I'm currently using. I think, if I'm honest, that is broadly the way that I normally approach it.
I'm going to give you a copy of the highway code.
I mean, in the same 24 hours, I can be saying bloody pedestrians. Look at that cyclist getting in my way, and what the hell's that car driver doing so close? I can do all of those in 24 hours.
However, you have to say, like, these are individuals, right? In this specific scenario where somebody can just be an idiot, right?
Yes.
Who is really annoying you. It doesn't mean that all, like, it really annoys me when I see these Facebook comments like, all you cyclists jump red lights. I've never jumped a red light. Never.
No.
You know, and yes, there are idiots out there, and there are idiots that happen to be on the bike at this moment of time.
Yeah.
So,
you know,
because I think there's actually classes under. There's a few rules under the new code, or the guidelines. Did they call it guidance?
Guidance. The new guidance.
New guidance. Yeah. So there's a lot of the new guidance, which broadly, if you were to summarise it, is don't be a dick. I think is probably the best way, which is don't be a dick on your bike and stop all the traffic just because you feel entitled to ride in the middle of the road. And at the same time, as a driver, don't be a dick and trying to just like get too close to other people.
Give people space.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I think that might just we might have just designed their new advertising slogan for everybody to listen to.
Make it simple, right?
Make it simple. Mutual respect, in brackets, don't be a dick. There you go.
Brilliant.
There you go. Perfect. If any,
that should be on the front of the highway code, really, shouldn't it?
So the new Velocino advertising agency is now open for business. Absolutely. So coming back to that, so under the don't be a dick set of guidance, so we've got the riding slightly further out, but also there's some stuff on passing distances, both for cyclists and horses.
Yeah. There's also one slight further thing with the cyclists now that they're encouraged to, with the guidance, to ride normally. You know, let's say you're riding through a town or a busy area, to be at least half a metre away from the curb. So not riding in the gutter, making yourself more visible. So that's another guidance, which I think is a good thing as well. But yes, so going on to the sort of giving clearance and things, as a driver then, and approaching cyclists, I think, again, common sense, we all go around a cyclist and we all want to give them space when we go around them. But now, like with the hierarchy thing, I think the highway code have kind of put it in black and white. And they want you to give them 1.5 metres clearance when you go past the cyclist. Horse riders slowing right down. Again, I think this is common sense. We all slow right down. We're careful with horse riders. and we want to give them about 2 meters clearance if we can.
Absolutely. Now, I saw, interestingly, on the very weekend that the new rules came out, I saw a car behind 2 horses, and obviously was wanting to pass on a very small road where there was no room. And so, in answer to perhaps one of us is in the car, and we're on one of our local backcountry lanes, and there's somebody in front, and there isn't really room to get past. What should the motorist do?
Wait until there's a safe space to pass. Again, if you look at the hierarchy, there's a vulnerable road user. They have kind of a priority over you, if you like. And
absolutely.
so wait. Wait until there's a safe place to do it.
Absolutely, because I think it's almost, this is also like most bike races, and I think it's a famous thing from Le Mans, which was to finish first. First, you have to finish. And it's a bit like that if we're going out there. Right, okay, you want to get to your destination, you want to get there as quickly as you can, but to get there, we need to all get there alive. So just recognise that nothing is there is no appointment worth that you need to get past something quick enough that's you're going to threaten you or them.
And I don't know. I mean, I suppose in a way, doing this as a podcast as we're doing today, we're possibly preaching to the converted, aren't we? I think a lot of people know all this, and a lot of people put that into practice, and it's always the odd. You guys, I don't cycle out on the roads, and I don't cycle in groups. Occasionally, I go on the road, but I don't know what your kind of experience is of.
Bad. Yours is very bad.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually going to say mine is broadly good, although then Niels reminded me that I have had somebody once, while somebody was filming out the side of the car, someone leant out the back window and grabbed hold of me and threw me off my bike, and that did really hurt.
We're laughing, but it really must hurt. Like who thinks of this shit?
I am laughing at it, but because I'm kind of like, when something like that happens, you just know it's kids, and they're just being dicks. But they also
could have killed you.
They obviously didn't appreciate quite the danger that they were putting me in. I don't suppose, because nobody wants to kill someone, do they, or do all that kind of stuff. But but yeah, so I have had that. But I have to say, on the road broadly, the vast majority of drivers do give you a decent distance and are fine. And there are the odd ones that aren't. But I think, when somebody's leaning out a window and deliberately pushing you off your bike, that's assault. That's not really anything to do with driving, is it really? So yeah, but
I did a bit of practical experience today. Went out on my bike today, and I was up around Presswood.
Yep.
Climbing up the hill to Presswood. And I thought, I was doing a little road section, and I thought, I'll just see what this is like. So I was in the middle of my lane, and felt a bit weird, to be honest. I'll have to admit, it felt a bit odd, but I thought this is what I'm meant to do. So I'm pedaling up the hill, and heard a vehicle behind me, so I pulled over a bit. And I have to say, 2 or 3 vehicles passed me, and I wasn't right over, so I was still keeping a reasonable space, and everyone gave me plenty of space. So
it is interesting, actually. It's one of those things where we always remember the ones that didn't give us space rather than the 20 that did. So
it's always this perception as well. Like when you go riding a lot, when you are out almost every day or every weekend, the amount of situations where you feel very uncomfortable will also become naturally more. I've seen people in cars taking risk, and often it really felt as if they were trying to teach me a lesson, right? Like, you should not be here. And I think this is really difficult, because no matter what the changes to the highway code are, you can't change the mindset of these people.
See, this is it.
This is it. You're bang on.
Don't be a dick. You see,
Yeah.
this is it. I've just rewritten the highway code into forward. So that's quite a lot of cyclists. Is there anything else around the guidance around cyclists? Because obviously it's great for our sort of audience to know, particularly around that cycling.
Yeah, 2 things we haven't really touched on. One is that, and this always is a contentious thing, cycling along on your road 2 abreast.
Yes.
Road user comes behind, blasting horn. Well, I think this has always been okay. Again, taking into account that the cyclist is sensible and pulls into single file if something wants to pass you. So now this is out there.
Yeah.
You can ride two abreast, and this is now in the highway code that we can do this.
Absolutely. And this is one of those interesting things, because I think it's, as a cyclist, you know, that riding sort of two abreast is actually is probably a little bit safer. You're a bigger blob, if you like, for people to see.
Yeah.
But also you're actually easier to overtake.
Depends on how wide the road is, right?
Yeah. But you are, you're broadly on a normal road, two lanes, you're easier to overtake than like 10 people strung out in single file. So, you know, and I think a lot of us that are cyclists, depending on where you are, sometimes you do split into single file and then split into blocks of sort of 3 or 4, just so that cars can get round.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible thing to do, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. But what's interesting there is that they've put it into the highway code. It's just as much, I think, for when we're driving a car, to remember that that's okay. That's okay for them to do that.
That's right.
Rather than necessarily.
And I think this is also like a very difficult point with the highway code, because they've made this better now, but for me it's still sometimes a little bit unclear, because they use shall, should, could, can, maybe, no, not maybe, but you know, like
ambiguity.
Exactly. I think this is like really, and then they say at certain points, oh, this is much more clear now. I'm like, I'm not sure if this is like really that clear.
No, I agree. So, there always seems to be a caveat at the end of it. You know, you can do this, but make sure you're safe first. Well,
do you know what?
You know,
I would. Do you know what? If I was writing one of these things, I would be that mischievous person that would put an asterisk on one of them, right? And then you'd have to look all the way to the back of the book to find what it referenced, and it just in brackets, unless it's Wednesday afternoon or something like that. Just some random thing, just to really.
If I would write it, it would be a very Germanic one. It would be just like no, it would be just the rules, because you know, in Germany everything that is not allowed is forbidden. Right?
Oh yeah, but absolutely, it's not that you can't do it; it's forbidden.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
So
there's a lot around the cyclist there with the guides. Now, you did previously bring up something that is a little bit more contentious.
I think so. Yeah. So the guidance now is that with cyclists, let's say in town in a busier traffic environment, they can pass on the left or the right of the traffic. But have to make sure it's safe when they do so.
And I guess that's the big question then, I guess, I'm imagining, is really, when is it really safe to be passing on the inside of traffic?
To me, never.
No.
Do you do it?
No, I don't actually. And it's rare that I do, normally because there's not any room on the left, if I'm quite honest.
No, you're right.
And if there is, it's normally that somebody's moved to the right so they can turn left maybe or something like that.
Yeah. And my assumption here is that what I said earlier with the lines in Germany, you stick to your line, that they think of an imaginary cycle lane that isn't there, but while the bike is there, it is there.
Yes.
I think this is that might be the basic principle behind it. However, holy shit! Like, just, you know, you stop there and then you want to take someone to the train station, and then it's like, okay, we're not moving. Maybe hop out here. Like, this is dangerous because you have 2 mirrors to look into.
Well, now this is absolute. Now, Dean, a question here. There is a mirror on the left-hand side of the car that people should be looking at. But it's one of the things that, you know, how often do people actually use that mirror?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think they don't use it so often, and you're not going to see that person coming up the inside, because, you know, we're driving along that mirror. It's just there. It's next to us, isn't it? It's quite natural. Just drive on and look to that one on the right-hand side. Looking over to that one on the left, it's just not natural. People don't do it enough, and also, it's a difficult one to teach.
It is.
Also for a passenger, right? If you're in the passenger seat, you might not even think of having something there, right? You just open to get out. You're not expecting another car to pass. So it will again take, like we spoke to Dr. Ian Powell, Dr. Ian Walker, months and months ago about habits, and it really is difficult to break a habit.
And talking about habits, Niels, we overtake, don't we? We overtake. So when do we overtake? We overtake on the right. we don't undertake. So this, to me, is a rule that, I don't know, we've got guidance there, but I'm not sure how.
It is one of those things where I've seen it in the guidance, but I'd be really interested to other cyclists to hear from you. So please do get in contact with us, what your opinion is on this, because my thought is that personally, if I see that in the highway code, that's great. But if I'm coming up to a junction, particularly, or I'm just coming up through traffic and I'm on the inside lane, I'm not going to trust the car in front to have looked in the rear view, in the wing mirror, and checked that I'm there. Whilst at the same time, they're also trying to check for pedestrians as they're turning into a corner, and all these other things.
Being also really annoyed at this moment because I have to wait.
Yeah. And so I am not for 1 minute going to think that, because, of course, if they make a mistake, they get a bump. If they've made a mistake, I get run over. Well, not quite run over, but the idea is because of the great power, greater responsibility, I have less power, I have more chance of getting hurt. So because of that approach, I have to admit, although it is in the highway code, I think it's one of those things where a cyclist is still going to hold back maybe and think, oh, I'm not sure I want to do that, particularly if it's a Honda Jazz, because let's face it, let's just put it out there, if it's a Honda Jazz driver, right, you know to give a fair distance. So you're not going to want to come up that inside. No. And I'm always, I think, going to just always let the car go and just try and hang back.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's a difficult one, I think. I think it's good. It's good that they did something about it, right? I think it's like that there is a rule change in place, and they, whatever the reasoning behind the specific rule is, they thought, okay, we want to make it easier and keep you safe, so you are allowed to do it. If you are really safe on the left-hand side, I think that we will see over the next couple of months, years.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I don't know if you know, for many, many years, cars weren't made with a wing mirror on the left-hand side.
This is true.
So it was back, I think it wasn't until the late 70s, early 80s that they actually had to have a wing mirror on the left-hand side. So if you look at some classic cars, in fact, they don't have anything there at all.
I forgot about that, actually.
It must have to do because at that time everybody was riding penny farthings, so you couldn't see them anyways.
Yeah.
They're high up.
You just needed just to look up. That's right.
Yeah.
But no, so actually, any of our sort of older listeners or people that passed their test before 1980, or actually at no point were required to look in that near side mirror because it wasn't even there.
I mean, now the guidance is when I'm teaching, I'm trying to teach people to use mirrors in pairs. So if you're turning left, you check your rear view mirror and your door mirror. You're turning right, you use your rear view mirror and your right door mirror. And that's the ideal way you got that awareness around you.
Use your mirrors in pairs.
Use your mirrors in pairs.
See, top tip as well. Actually, we will come to, but at the end, we'll perhaps touch on some things that, just as we've got you here, what are the common mistakes that drivers are making at the moment, and perhaps some of the stuff that we should all, a little bit of a refresher, a couple of top tips for us.
Yeah. Sure,
See, that's it. We've booked him. We're going to use him for absolutely everything we can. So what else have we got in the guidance that stands out for you?
I think we're pretty much covered with the main changes. The other one, which we sort of touched on before we started recording, was the guidance about the Dutch reach.
Yeah,
the Dutch.
I mentioned
fantastic. I mean, if you want something to call something to make it sound like it's rude and worth listening to,
indeed.
When I looked up at Dutch reach and I discovered it's about how you open a car door, it has so disappointed.
I promise you, it has nothing to do with the Dutch rudder and also nothing to do with the Dutch oven. So, and please don't look any of these up. But saying that,
I mean, there is some kind of logic in this, I think, and there is some kind of sense in trying to preach this. Just thinking about opening your car door and thinking what's behind you before you do it. And if you use your far hand to do it, you're naturally twisting your body around, and hopefully then you're going to be more aware rather than just doing it with that and shoving your elbow out and opening that door.
Yeah. You're going to at least just take that 1 or 2 seconds to check what's behind you.
So basically, you take your left hand, turn over and open the door, and while that you do that, you look back automatically.
Correct.
And I think they come with very hefty fines. I don't know exactly the fine, but I read about $1,000 or something if they catch you if you don't do it. I don't know if this is confirmed. This was somewhere on
I
Facebook.
haven't seen that,
So
Niels. No, I don't know whether that's an endorsable, therefore a finable offence. I don't know.
But-
We'd have to check that out.
Yeah,
But-
we'll have to check that actually, because although there's, I mean, the first thing is everybody don't do it, but doing some of these, infringing some of these are up to £1,000 fine. Some of them are points on your license. Some of it, and that's the difference between what's the law and what is the guidance as to whether you're getting a fine or how it fits together.
sorry, just regarding the points to our racing friends out there, like getting points on your license is not positive. It's really not positive. It's like negative. So,
It's a very bad thing to do. Yes.
yeah. I spoke to some friends, by
Let's
the way,
move
this
on before
morning.
we start talking about points on license.
or Dutch ovens. I spoke to some friends this morning from Holland actually, or from the Netherlands, and I asked them if this is actually a thing. Like, have they heard of the Dutch Reach? And they're like, no. Like,
Well, see, they would just call it the Reach, wouldn't they?
yeah. Well, there's so many myths out there, like where people just make this up and they're like, oh, in the Netherlands everybody does it, so this is why it's a Dutch Reach. However, they advised me that for them, since they were little, it was always normal that when they open the door, they have to double check who's around, because the likelihood that there's a bike passing them is so high because everybody's riding bikes.
So more natural instinct for the Dutch people to do that, I guess.
Yeah.
More bikes means more danger, means more self-preservation, I guess. Is the way it works. I mean, I didn't know if they were going to call it the Danish Reach or something like that.
Well, most probably. The Danish call it the German.
Call it the Copenhagen Curl.
Well, no, but to our conversation, we had like a bit of a conversation before the podcast, before we hit the record button, and it really annoys me so often. I'm on social media, I see certain like points being made on Facebook comments where like, in Germany this is like law, and I'm like, no, that's not. You just want to basically make your point a bit stronger, but this is really like so often there's so many myths out there where they refer to other countries. However, there are certain bits in Germany that I realized that are really different to the UK, and I also mentioned that earlier before the recording. So I repeat it again. When I had a incident with a car very early on when I came to the UK, and I wanted to go to the police, and then everybody was like, well, but you have to prove that the car did something wrong. And I was like, huh? Well, what I didn't do anything. Like, why do I have to prove wrong? And it turned out in the UK is one of the very few countries in the European Union, not European Union, in Europe,
the continent of Europe,
where if there's an incident between a car and a bike, the bike has to prove that the car did something wrong. When most other countries in Europe, the car has to prove that they did not something wrong.
Indeed, and I guess that might come in the future for us, because you can hit, in that hierarchy that they've given of responsibility. I mean, at the moment it's guidance and it's a hierarchy, and you know the logical conclusion to that in the future might be actually if if in a game of top trumps, whoever hits the smaller one, they're more likely to be at fault because they should have had more responsibility.
Exactly.
It's like a really extended rock, paper, scissors.
So I want to see like
pedestrian. Like,
I'm really looking forward, like what this all will be, and I think we will only find out over the next couple of months and years when the first, unfortunately, incidents happened.
Yeah, you're right. And
don't be that incident. Whoever listens, like, please don't enforce it. I think this is also a valid point.
No. But if you are the first incident, please do get in touch with the podcast. We'd love to interview you.
Yeah, but like my point that I try to make is, don't enforce it. Like it's early on still. If you know you are in the right, don't enforce you on the right. If you're dead, it doesn't help.
And actually, a real world incident did happen to me 2 days ago. Not me directly, but a person that I had on a driving test. So obviously from my point of view, I've been trying to teach the people that this is what they've got to do now. And there's great confusion for them, all the things they have to do to pass a driving test, all the things in their head. Under what incidents or what circumstances is this a junction? Do I have to stop for this person here, there, and all this sort of thing? Okay. So this is confusion. Maybe for us, it might be a little bit clearer for an experienced road user. We're yet to find out. Anyway, so on a driving test, she's turning left at a roundabout. successfully turns left at a roundabout, and coming off the roundabout, there's a pedestrian that isn't crossing the road but wants to cross the road. She's now indecisive, so she's slowing down.
Yeah.
Pedestrian then starts crossing the road, so therefore really we should be stopping to give them priority. But indecision, she drives round, and that was regarded as a serious fault in a driving test. So that was 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, real life.
It's tricky.
happens.
Do you know what? I do, particularly for these poor kids that have just learning
high
to
pressure.
pass, they've got their way through it, and then suddenly the rules change.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you've
Yeah.
got slightly different rules.
How was that actually? Like, I can't remember. I think it was on the 30th of January when it changed or something.
It was.
And if you were doing your training the week before, or like,
I know. Yeah.
how weird is that?
I mean,
And then you have to test after.
I knew these changes were coming in, so it's making people aware of this possibility as early as you can, really. But then is that tipping point, isn't it, when it's live and direct?
Yeah.
Now this is happening, and
Indeed.
tricky.
Well, look. So that's the majority of the rules and what's going to be affecting us. And thanks for taking us through that, Dean, because I think it is talking through these situations and where is the risk and what should we be doing and things like that.
Yeah.
Use two mirrors when you're when we're in the car, and as a cyclist, just and a pedestrian, recognizing that there might be some indecision. Keep the eye contact, communication, and all those things.
That's a really good point, by the way. Sorry for
Keep
just
it
interrupted. Someone in our group said it the other day. I think it was Mark, who said, "I want to have like eye contact first before I make a decision if I cross."
That's
And I think
that's a really
it helps.
good point. Yes. Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I would want to as well, I think.
Yeah, because sometimes, and really the intention of this recording is nowhere near like us versus them. It's just talking about the highway code changes because to basically unwrap a couple of these myths and stuff. But however, also like make sure to be safe. And I think when you are seen, you are safe, right? Like, because sometimes it can happen that there are incidents and you are just not seen.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to happen. We are just all human, right?
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. We've all been there. As in, you're driving, you're keeping focused on the road, but something happens, or two or three things happen. Something happens in the car. You're slightly distracted. Two things happen outside. A cyclist turns up. A dog runs out at the same time. All these things come together, and we don't always make the perfect choices in the moment. So look, let's face it. None of us are perfect in that. But yeah, I think it's been really useful going through the updates, and I think some of these scenarios that we've discussed about what's going to keep us safe and what's going to keep us safe, but help us keep others safe as we're on the road. But I guess the one thing just to remind everybody is, doesn't matter whether you agree with these changes or not. They are now the way we drive cars. They are now part of the highway code, and so whether you like it or not, these are the new rules of the game that we've got to play to.
Exactly.
So brilliant. So thank you, Dean. Thank you so much for joining us. One quick question: if there's, obviously, you're on the road all the time. You're teaching a lot of learners. You're an expert driver. You're constantly updated on driving, and you get to observe a lot of driving. If there is something that when we're either on our bikes, or one thing on our bikes and maybe one thing when we're in our cars, is there something that you observe that you think all drivers should really just have a second think about, or one thing that all cyclists should have a second think about?
Let me rephrase this. Is there something that you observe on the road and that really pisses you off?
I think, yeah.
Much better said than what I was going to say. Yeah. What do cyclists do that pisses you off, and what is it that cars do that pisses you off that we should all do better?
With cars, it's you just sort of see bad driving every day, don't you? Yeah. Not signalling, really. Jesus.
BMWs, right?
Yeah, but I've got a BMW. I don't need to. Come on. Indicators don't work.
So not signalling is one of the big ones, I think. For cyclists, no, I don't really see. I mean, I guess sometimes with cyclists, we were talking about cyclists in groups and things, and if they're not then that considerate to sort of pull over and make space, you can see them sort of chatting along and having a great time, and there's 7 cars behind them. clearly that's not going to really pan out too well to the 7 guys behind them. So that kind of thing can
Yeah. I think
sometimes.
yeah, because I find that really interesting is that look, obviously we're cyclists. So I see a bunch of cyclists, I just hang back and I go, oh, that's a nice jersey. Oh, I quite like those. Oh, he's got those new pedals. Those nice, right?
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy to do that. But you do see when that goes on for too long, what it builds up, rightly or wrongly. Everybody should be patient, but the first driver starts to get slightly more impatient and perhaps takes a risk, goes slightly at the wrong time because they're desperate to get past. So it kind of helps everything, doesn't it?
But then also, like, often it is like a knock-on effect, because it's the moment the first car overtakes, the second one thinks like, oh, I can also squeeze through, and the third one is like, oh, they have overtaken, I also, and then it gets like more and more dangerous. So I think also, in order to keep you safe, like if there's a way, just like to let the cars pass, make up in your mind what's the easiest way to let them get away.
Yeah.
Because I hear so often conversations like, but it's so much easier for them to overtake when we are like two abreast. Sometimes it is, maybe for you, but sometimes not. Maybe just think, is in this scenario where you are in at the moment, is it really the best thing to do? And I think again it comes down to like, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. See, this is it. This is
Headline
it.
of today. Don't be a dick.
But do you know what? I think everybody, we've now found the title for this particular podcast episode, which is "Don't Be a Dick." Fantastic.
Although in our title, like we always use the name of our guest and then the title.
Oh no, Dean Powell, don't be a dick. That's not.
No, we can't do
that. That's probably not going to be very helpful. Nicest way to do it. We'll have to have it as a subtitle, like somewhere else.
We'll think about it.
Yeah. But mutual respect. Oh, we'll do that. Dean Powell, mutual respect, in brackets, don't be a dick. Brilliant. Fantastic.
So good.
Excellent. Well, look, Dean, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of our podcast. And listeners, I do hope you've enjoyed the podcast and listening to... it's slightly different from what we've done today, but it's really topical about the highway code. And we'd love to get your feedback, your idea, your experiences out on the road. And please do get in contact with the podcast and let us know how you're getting on with it. If you want to get in contact with the podcast, Niels, what's the best way to do that?
Send us an email to podcast@velocino.com or reach out to us on Instagram. Actually, all social media handles is Velocino. Just send us a message and you can be sure we'll come back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Niels. And just because Dean is far too polite to plug his own business, I'm going to do it for him. If you are learning to drive and you're based anywhere around the Chilterns, do get in contact with Chiltern Learners. They're also on Instagram under Chiltern Learners, I believe. Actually, believe it or not, it's one of the things I follow, and it's great. Actually, I tell you what, it's really great to follow because you get to follow these young people with the big smiles on their faces as they're passing their test week in, week in. You get to see it. So please do, if you're thinking of taking a driving test, get in touch with Dean.
Yeah, keep in mind we cyclists stick together, right? So if there's a driver's instructor who is also a cyclist, obviously you know where you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So, well, brilliant. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to all our listeners. And now I don't know about you, Niels, and Dean, but I think it's time for us to probably get on our bikes and retest the highway code, and let's just see if we can keep the communication up. Mutual respect. Don't be a dick, because the best stories have not yet been written.
Ta-dum.